Okay, so we've cut out our pattern pieces for this Seattle bucket hat, and we should have the pattern is nested so that you have 3 pieces, and you're going to need 2 of those for the shell and 2 of those for the liner. Now, these were laser cut, but you could just as easily print these out 1-to-1 and use it as a template to cut it by hand. And I'll try to put that the links to that pattern in the description. So we have 2 of these for the shell, and we've also cut 2 for the liner, like so. And the way this pattern is designed is that you can make these 2 different colors if you want, or two of the same color. For the liner, I usually make it the same color, and then for the outer shell, I do combinations of colors depending on how I feel. These could actually be the same or different, and then these could be aligned so that they're either opposite, like so, or even offset, like so. So there's any number of combinations you can do with the colors in this pattern. All right, I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew the shell first, and then we'll sew the liner, and then we'll combine those 2 together. Okay, the first part we're going to do is the lid, and these are the outer faces, and so we want it face to face like that. And then we're going to use these clips, and we want to line up the notches and then clip it like so. Clipped. All right, this is done with a 3/8 seam allowance, so this notch here will tell you where you're supposed to be sewing, the line you're supposed to be sewing on, which aligns with this, the outside edge of where that 1 is. All right, so we're going to start there. We do a little bit of a back stitch, and then forward, and we'll remove these clips as we go. And then we'll go all the way up, just short of the end there, and then back stitch, and then cut. All right. Now we're going to flip it, and we're going to do a top stitch on both sides of this. So we're going to flip it, flatten this out a little bit, so get it nice and flat. And for this, we're going to use the outside edge of the foot to give us an indication of where our line's going to be. So just the outside edge. And same thing, we're going to do a little bit of a back stitch first, and then we're going to go all the way across. And then back stitch at the end. Cut. All right. Now we're going to do that for the other side. Okay, so again, we want to make sure it's flat. This time we're going from this edge, from this direction. Same thing, we'll line it up with the outside edge of that foot. A little bit of a back stitch. And all the way across. And then back stitch here, and then cut. Okay. Looks nice and clean. Alright, and it keeps it flat as well on the top. Alright, the next step is to start with the sides of the hat, and which those are the pieces that are slightly wider and slightly shorter. The brim is going to be longer. So we're going to start with these pieces, and the way I'm going to orient this one is we're going to have alternating colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, face to face here, and we're going to pin this or clip it starting from the center out, and once we have it clipped, then we're going to stitch that. Alright, so I'm lining up my notches and then clipping each section. These notches should all line up so that there'd be the same number of sections on both sides. Alright, we're just going to clip all of that all the way across. Okay, now that we have this clipped all the way around, I'm going to sew it with the side facing down and the top facing up, and then as we run it through, we're going to kind of roll it like this, like it's on a curve. Okay, that'll give us the cleanest set of stitches here. All right, I'm going to start at this side. Again, we'll do a little bit of a back stitch at the start, and we'll keep moving, and every once in a while you can want to stop, reorient your material to get it flat and straight, and then keep going. Remember, it's a 3/8 seam allowance here. Stop and rotate, remove the clip, and then keep going. Alright, I'm going to keep doing that all the way till I get to the end here. Okay, we're almost to the end. The last one, and we come to here, and then back stitch, and then cut. Alright, that's that side. Now we're going to do the other half. Okay, so we've clipped the other half of the side onto here, and we're going to do the same thing we did here. We're going to basically stitch a little bit of back stitch, stitch all the way around, sort of gradually rotating it as we go, and then we'll come out to here, and then that'll be both sides. All right, and then the next step will be to do these seams. So I'm going to do this part, and then we'll come back to that. Okay, so we stitched that part. This is what it looks like right now. We'll flip it. Alright, now we're going to stitch these sides down, and again, face to face. And so we're going to clip using our notches. We're going to clip this section here, and then same on this. We're going to clip this. Alright. Okay, we've clipped it. Now we're going to stitch this up. Start right about there. Do our back stitch, 3/8 seam allowance again. We're going to come all the way up as high as we can up to here, but making sure we're not going into the other material, because we need to fold this down flat. We're going to fold this flat and do a cover stitch on the top. Alright, so don't go too far up. Okay, same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we have both of these, both edges are stitched up. Alright, now we're going to flip it and then do the cover stitch. Alright, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut these little triangles off, because we don't actually need those for the pattern. We need the notches to align, but we don't need them. They're not structural, so we're going to cut those off, make that corner a little bit cleaner. Same on this side, we'll just cut these off. Alright. Okay, similar to how we did the lid, we want to flatten these. Make sure this is flat. And I'm going to come in from the top. And then we're going to use the foot, the edge of the foot, to align where we want this to go. And then a little back stitch, and then just all the way up. I'm going to try and get that lined up. And we can't really go too far into this bump or else it's not going to go over. So we'll just go right about to there and then back stitch, like so. Alright, now we're going to do that side as well. But in this case we're going to do it, use the other side of the foot for alignment. Okay, so that's our top stitch, and we're going to do the same on the other side. Okay, once we have the top stitch on both sides, you'll notice there's like a little bit of a gap here where these four corners meet. So we're going to come back to this side, and we're just going to do like a reinforcement stitch across here to keep these four corners a little more stable. So just like a really quick, just stitch like right across there. All the way back. Alright, that's just to reinforce that little corner. Do the same on the other side. Okay, we have our top part of the hat. Now we're going to do the brim pieces. And it's going to be very similar to how we attached the sides to the top. We're basically going to do face to face using these notches as our guide. We'll clip it and then sew it around, and then we'll also do the top stitch on the ends. Alright, so I'm going to clip this up first. Okay, so we've clipped the brim, and similar to how we did the lid to the side, we're going to kind of, because of the way it's angled, we're going to kind of roll it this way as we're coming through. So every once in a while we'll stop and adjust, and then sort of kind of like roll the whole thing through, kind of like that. Alright? Okay, so I'm going to get this started. Again, so 3/8 seam allowance. A little bit of a back tack. Every once in a while we just want to pause, lift the foot, realign the fabric, make sure it's straight, because these, it's a three-dimensional shape, so we have to constantly change the alignment of the fabric slightly, and we'll just work our way through, all the way across. Alright, we're going to do the same for the other half of the brim. We did that part, we're going to do this part, and once we get both parts of the brim on, then we're going to do that middle seam and the edge. Alright, I'm going to do this piece now. Okay, we did both parts of the brim. Now we're going to put the seam up the middle. So we want to clip it similar to how we did the sides. We're going to clip it using the notches as reference, like so. Alright, then we're going to stitch that up, and then on both sides, and then put a cover stitch. Alright, now the other side. Now the cover stitch. Okay, then cover stitch on the other side. Okay, so now that's the completed shell. All right, so we're going to do the same thing with the liner pieces with our Sherpa fleece. Same construction with the liner, and then we're going to put those two together and then invert it. All right. Okay, now we're sewing up the liner. Same construction method, just a few minor differences. Makes it less complicated because, for instance, we're not going to bother with a cover stitch because you would never see that with the amount of pile on this material. So same construction basically, and I'll try to detail some of these minor changes, but first you start with the top, and we're just going to do the stitch across here. And the same 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay. But in this case, no top stitch needed. All right, one other minor difference when I'm doing the liner is that instead of doing it like this piece to this, I'm actually going to do this piece connected to here because it's the same color, but also it'll give us a little bit of extra strength with this solid piece coming across here, just slightly more strength, and it doesn't affect the color of the pattern. All right, so I'm going to clip this up and then we're going to sew that. Okay, same process here. We have the top here, the side here, and we're going to sort of like roll it as we go to get the correct shaping. So every once in a while you're going to want to pause and readjust the material. All right. And just readjust it slightly and keep going. Readjust. And now we'll do the other side. Okay. Same as the outer shell. Once we've got the sides on, we're going to seam up these edges. All right, face to face. So now do the brim. Okay, so I've clipped the brim pattern piece to the rest, and notice again I've offset it so that this seam is lined up here, so we don't have four corners meeting together. That gives it a little bit of extra strength. and also because it's all the same color, it's not going to affect any sort of pattern that we were going for. Okay, I'm going to sew this up same way we did the other one, where we're kind of rolling it through to get the right shape on this. Okay, I'm going to sew that up, and then we'll do the other side. Okay, so we've got both brim pieces put on there. So the last step is to seam these together on both edges. All right, so I'm going to do that, and then once we finish that, then it's going to be combining the shell and the liner into a single piece, and then we invert it. One additional thing I'm going to do, this is optional, but I'm going to put an extra top stitch around where the brim attaches to the side. And the idea is that a lot of these bucket hats, they'll put stitching circumferentially around for stiffness. I'm not going to do that for this hat, but if I do at least this one stitch, it'll help to stabilize it. And also if you fold it over double like this, so you're capturing this part, it's going to add a little bit of extra strength to that attachment of the brim to the side. So I'm going to do that. It's optional, but I do think it helps keep the overall form a little bit sharper and cleaner. Okay, so if you decide to do this, you're going to use the outside of the foot as a guide. In fact, you want to be in, I like to go like halfway through that foot, so it's less than 1/8 of an inch, about 1/8 of an inch. And then you also want to make sure that this seam is folded under flat. Same thing, you do a little bit of a back stitch to get started, and then we're trying to keep this edge in line with that, so we're about 1/8 inch off of that seam. And you just go slowly, and then just check to make sure that your seam is still flat and folded over. And you just go all the way around. All right, I'm going to finish that up, and we'll cut back after this is done. Okay, so we have our two pieces. We have our shell, we have our liner. We want to sew these together, and we do that face to face. So it's going to look like this. We're going to use the clips to attach these, and what I like to do is, if I have a seam here and a seam here, I want to offset that by basically 90 degrees so that this will actually land here, like so. All right, I'm going to clip these all the way around, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, so we've clipped this all the way around, and you notice I'm lining up the notches on the shell with the notches on the liner, doing that all the way across. There's still one thing we have to do here. Now we need a gap in order to invert this, right? Because we're doing face to face. So the seam allowance will be on the inside. We need to leave ourselves a gap, maybe 4 inches or so. And I like to do it between here where there's no seams going up and down. So we're going to do this right around here. And the way that I would mark this, we want to leave ourselves an opening. We're going to mark it by adding some extra clips, like so. And then we're going to call, when we see these line of clips here, we're going to know that we don't want to stitch through that area. So we're going to start this side and work our way around back to here. When we get to this, we'll leave that open. All right, we're going to start working our way around here. Again, this is 3/8 seam allowance is all for the whole hat. Everything's 3/8 seam allowance. So we got it lined up here. Our indicator for where we want our gap is on this side. We're going to do a back stitch as we normally do, and then we're just going to start working our way around. Alright, I'm going to keep going, and I'll pick it up again when we get over to here. Okay, we're coming up on the last area here. Back stitch. Okay, so that left us about 4 inches. We'll cut it there. Alright, so now we have a gap here that we can use to invert this. Alright, I'm going to show you how to do that. Alright, we're going to invert this hat and basically just very gently take the inside material and start pulling it through the hole. Careful not to rip any seams, okay? Don't want to do that. And just keep pulling it out till, yeah, there we go. Now it's completely out like that. It's gonna look like a giant ball, but we're gonna push this in like so. All right, mostly done, not quite done. We still need to now close this gap. And in addition to that, we're also going to put a seam around here, around the edge, one seam that'll stabilize that connection between the liner and the shell. Now to close up this hole, what we're going to do, I'm going to fold it roughly where the seam allowance, or where the stitch line is supposed to be. So the seam allowance is going to the inside. Same for this. And we just sort of want to line it up where we think that's going to go, like that. And then we're going to clip it here. And we're going to do the same across that whole, like roughly 4-inch opening. We're going to clip that in place. I usually work from the center and move outward so that it's nice and even. Okay. Now, we're also going to want to do a seam all the way around, but the key is we want to make sure that we're actually getting the very edge. So what I do is I pull it tight, and then put a clip in, and you should be able to feel the seam allowance on the inside. That's how you know that you're all the way out to the edge. So pull it tight and put a clip there. And once we've clipped this all the way around, we're going to stitch it. So put clips like roughly every inch across the whole thing, and make sure you're pulling it tight so that the seam allowance is all the way up at the edge there. Okay, so I've clipped the entire edge. I've added extra clips here just to indicate where that hole is, but also to stabilize that. So because as we stitch this, we're going to have to pull the clips off, and we don't want it to sort of like come out. All right, so now we would just come back here. Similar thing, we're going to use the edge of the foot as a reference, and we're just going to put a single top stitch just about 1/8 inch off of that existing seam line. Okay, I'm starting here. Notice I'm going about the middle of that foot is about 1/8 inch from the needle. Do a little bit of a back stitch, and we just sort of very carefully go all the way around, trying to keep that alignment so we maintain that 1/8 of an inch spacing as we go around, because this is going to be visible in the final hat. Okay, now we're getting to the part where our opening is. We're going to do the same thing, but we're just going to be a little more careful with our material. And I also, if you notice, I like having a little bit of this Sherpa liner sticking out. Just gives it like a nice extra look, a bit of character. But you want to be very careful as you come through here to not lose that edge, but still maintain it so that it looks uniform in this section. So just be patient with this little section here. Okay, so now we're pretty much through that. Now we're back to normal. All right, and keep stitching all the way around. Okay, so we're finishing this up. The back tack, cut. All right, so we stitch that all the way around. And now there is our original Seattle bucket hat. There you go. All right, check the description for a link. And in that link, there will be some written instructions, and then how to download the pattern, and any other information you might need. I'll try to include in that link. All right, thank you for watching.